I won't let my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis symptoms define me.
Emerge as you. In 2 clinical studies, Tremfya guselkumab, taken by injection, provided 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks in 7 out of 10 adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. In a study, nearly 7 out of 10 patients with 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks were still clearer at 5 years. At 1 year and thereafter, patients and healthcare providers knew that Tremfya was being used. This may have increased results. Results may vary.
Serious allergic reactions may occur. Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms of infection, including fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Tell your doctor if you had a vaccine or plan to.
Emerge as you. Learn more about Tremfya, including important safety information at tremfya.com or call 1-877-578-3527. See our ad in Food and Wine magazine. For patients prescribed Tremfya, cost support may be available.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to get into the best of the rest. After giving you our top 50 list last week, we're going to discuss the players who fell just short of our top 50 and break down some of the things that they have done in 2024 and our expectations for them for the future. We're also going to talk about another big promotion that happened in the Orioles farm system, and that is Jud Fabian making the jump from AA Bowie to AAA Norfolk. All of that will be coming up in just a moment. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From preseason NFL to college kicking off, BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or on one of their over 150 slots games. Head to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. And now, as I mentioned, Jud Fabian has received the call up from Bowie to Norfolk, and it comes without very little surprise. Fabian has put together a solid all-around year at Bowie. And although you wouldn't necessarily know it from the batting average, it has been a big uptick in production from what he did last year. In 422 plate appearances at the Bay Sox, Fabian hit .233 with a .326 on-base percentage and a .432 slugging percentage, while belting 18 home runs, driving in 58, and posting a .114 WRC+. Perhaps the most important thing is that after striking out 37.5% of the time after being promoted to Bowie last year, he cut the strikeout rate down to 29.9%, which is a big step forward for a guy where there have always been questions about the swing and miss tendencies. Now, his walk rate did come down in the process, but still a step forward in an area where Fabian did need to make progress. He'll now go to AAA Norfolk for the final few weeks of their season. And one other thing that this does is it opens up more opportunities in center field for the recently promoted Enrique Bradfield Jr., who came up from Aberdeen to Bowie last week. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. But focusing on Fabian for a moment, clearly brings an infusion to Norfolk's roster during the final weeks of the season. They get a look at a guy that's probably going to be their everyday center fielder to start off 2025, and a prospect that still has plenty of question marks but has made significant progress this year. I don't think this promotion comes as a surprise in any sense of the word, but I do want to get your guys' thoughts about it, starting with Bob. What did you see from Fabian at Bowie this season?
I just thought was more consistent and, continued to do what he does in the field, just refining, not really any big overhauls. I think, honestly, one of the biggest differences is his BABIP is around average at 296, where last year in Bowie it was 233, which combined with a near 40% strikeout rate led to his average well under 200. So I think, he basically just, his luck evened out, but he also refined his swing where I don't think he was going all out as much. Still 18 home runs, 16 doubles. ISO is there for someone that can play. I don't know about Gold Glove caliber defense in center field, but very, very good center field defense, a great arm. He's basically, for me, he's right-handed hitting Kyle Stowers, but can actually play really good defense at all three outfield spots. With a bat like that, I think that plays much better at that position rather than a corner outfield where your bat has to carry the day. I think you're looking at a guy that if he can hit 230, 240, he's going to have a on base over 320. He's going to give you a slugging percentage in the 400s. And like I said, combined with that defense, that's at least good enough to be a fourth outfielder on a team. If Austin Slater can have a big role in the Orioles here down the stretch, I don't see why Jud Fabian couldn't maybe this time next year.
Yeah, my first thought was it's about time because they moved up Enrique Bradfield, Reed Trimble, and Tavian Josenberger from high A to double A, but kept Fabian and Beavers in double A. John Rhodes also still on the roster. I know we've talked a lot about Rhodes recently about his status right now, but that's a lot of outfielders to try to get regular at bats. And there was, like Zach alluded to, that AAA lineup has been completely void of prospects until Mayo officially returns. But there isn't a single prospect bat on that team. And Daniel Johnson, who this year's Daz Cameron, I love having him there, the break glass in case of an emergency outfielder. But no one down there deserving of more playing time than Fabian or even Beavers. And Fabian, I felt like, was definitely ahead of Beavers. Beavers, like I mentioned in the top 50 update, I don't think the bat had taken the step forward this year that I thought it would. But Fabian definitely has. I don't know. I think it's good timing because we get a few extra weeks. Believe it or not, Delmarva, Aberdeen only have 3 more series left. Bowie only has 4. And then Norfolk has 5. So they run until September 22nd. So we get a couple more weeks of Fabian's bat. I think we know he is one of the better defensive outfielders in the system. I'd say he's probably 15 plus home run a year guy. Maybe that's even a bit conservative. But I think a fair kind of floor for him in the major leagues. I know Bowie boost home runs, but you didn't see very many Bowie cheapies that he hit this year. Only 13 stolen bases this year after he stole 31 last year. But I think some of that was being in Aberdeen. That kind of the park factors for stolen bases, if that's not a thing, but would be through the roof for Aberdeen. But he's still a threat on the bases. And I think even though the walk rate took a big dip this year, he still walked 11% this year in Bowie. So that's still really good. I think, like Bob said, the floor is there to be an impact fourth outfielder in the big leagues. His lefty-righty splits, they're pretty much even. I think one thing that stood out is maybe, walks. He walks at a much higher rate against lefties, but everything else is pretty similar versus lefty and righty pitchers. I think if the strikeout rate continues trending in the direction it has, we saw Kyle Stowers do it when he got to AAA. If he can hit AAA pitching and the strikeouts continue to get better, I think there's even a very real path for him to eventually take over full-time center field duties in the big leagues. If he can hit, I think that's viable. And that, like I said, that floor as a fourth outfielder, a real impact fourth outfielder is there for him. So yeah, I mean, he had a 114 WRC plus this year in AA. It's 14% above league average. If he can be that or close to that in AAA, I think he's going to set himself up pretty nicely going into next year.
And I think that is the ultimate question about Fabian is, can he hit? Because there is room for a fourth outfielder who gives you value on defense and can hit for power, but also strikes out a lot and doesn't necessarily hit for a high average. One thing that would separate Fabian possibly from a guy like Jake Marincek, who had a long career in the major leagues despite never having a good hit tool at the major league level, is that Marincek never walked. Fabian can draw walks. So that's a separator there. There's clearly room in the future for Jud Fabian on a major league roster, but I think what a lot of, what we still have questions about, I know I certainly have them, is the hit tool going to develop enough that at this time next year, Fabian, let's say, is still in Norfolk. I wouldn't be surprised, nor would I be disappointed about that. Cedric Mullins is approaching free agency. Maybe Enrique Bradfield Jr. and Vance Honeycutt don't look like they're going to be ready for another year or two. Could Fabian be at least a stopgap option? What do you have to see in the hit tool as far as development goes for that to be a possibility?
It's a good question. Wish we had Anthony Villa or Matt Blood here to answer it. But, I think, look, Colton Cowser has a strikeout rate around 30%, and I think everyone's content with him. Most likely going to win, not to jinx it, the Rookie of the Year award. So it's definitely playable if he can keep it around the rate that it is right now. In Double A, obviously, that could I don't know why I said obviously twice, potentially go up as you go up to AAA and then the major leagues. But if he can just continue to refine and improve here and there, and I don't know, hopefully he's not Peyton Burdick, who the Orioles had in AAA earlier this year. But I think that's probably the floor. But the ceiling is, I think he could be a stopgap option. I think if he can consistently hit 230, 240 at AAA, you got to at least give him a chance to win that job. And obviously, that's my favorite word today. You want to have some other options as well, just in case it doesn't work out at the major league level. We've seen many times now prospects come up. They need a little bit of time to adapt and adjust. So, I wouldn't rule it out. And if anything, it's at least a good first run through for the player development system and the coaches before Vance Honeycutt comes into the system in a real way. And they can kind of use whatever tools they use to get Fabian where he is to help Vance as well.
And I know Saris talks about this a lot on Rates and Barrels podcast. The fact that the Orioles are really valuing the Orioles, I think the Twins were the two big ones that he always references. This, pull side power, like that's what they're concerned about. If strikeouts are going to go up, they're going to go up. They're going to be there, but tap into that pull side power, do damage. Slugging percentage wins you games. It's going to cause frustrations, but that's going to lead to more runs and more wins in the long run. And so that's what they're preaching up and down their system. And you saw that with Fabian, like the power, you saw a ton of that pull side power down there in Bowie. But I've mentioned this before. You've seen this with a couple of other power hitters in the minor leagues. We've seen more home runs. We've seen more power. We've seen more strikeouts and fewer walks. But with Fabian, we've seen, I think, better power, more controlled power. And the strikeouts have gone down while the walks have also gone down, but the strikeouts have gone down. So I just think that's all a good sign. And I think Fabian's doing exactly what the Orioles want him to do. And with the timing, I think this does set up for some pretty interesting timing because he's going to get a month in AAA now. All off season, he'll probably be a non-roster invitee to spring training. He will be a non-roster invitee to spring training. See how long he stays there. He'll be the opening day, most likely center fielder in Norfolk next year, and that gives Mullins time. Like, what does Cedric Mullins look like next year? And if he's not cutting it, and the Orioles want to move on, then Fabian could step up and take on that role. Or you're approaching the trade deadline if. Maybe Mullins is hitting well and maybe there's a small extension there, or maybe it's at least all right, he's going to play out the rest of this year. We are perfectly fine with having Cedric Mullins there. Enrique Bradfield Jr. is looking really good down in, AA, maybe in AAA by that time. Vance Honeycutt's playing well in the lower minors, but still, then you're sitting at the trade deadline with a center fielder who is ready for the major leagues in Jud Fabian. It's a pretty good trade option, a guy you can move at the trade deadline next year. So I don't know. I think that's a lot. It's a lot has to happen for that situation to play out, but he's setting himself up nicely to help out the organization in some way. As long as he can hit AAA, this is what I've been wanting to see for a while now. Get him to AAA because I want to see what he can do against AAA pitching.
Yeah, it'll be nice to have an actual prospect in AAA again after we graduated all of them, or they're not available currently. This past week was reminiscent of 2018, 2019 with the Norfolk Tide. So, get Fabian in there, get Mayo and Heston back, at least until they're back in the majors. So,
I have said this before about prospects over the years, and that is when there's a late season promotion, I don't care if they hit 100 or 400 at their new level in the final month of the year, the final month or less than a month of the season. The fact that they got there is an accomplishment. This is just an opportunity for them to get their feet wet and see what they have to improve on to succeed at that level next season. Now, with that in mind, I'll wrap up the Fabian part of this segment with this question, which is, what are your expectations for him between now and, let's say, the All-Star break in 2025?
Honestly, just I don't know. Maybe have similar line to what he does right now in AAA. Just continue to do what he does best, but just at the next level, and at least be ready to come up if an injury happens that is inconvenient for the Orioles. Hopefully we don't have the same amount of injuries next year as we did this year, but just be an option, I think. Be a guy that Michael Elias is out there saying Jud Fabian is a guy that's on the tip of our tongues. Yeah, just be an option, basically, to come up and help the team at some point in the near future.
Yeah, let's keep seeing the defense because he's moving to a much bigger outfield. We talk about this all the time. Center field at Harbor Park plays very large. Control that like he controlled center field in Bowie. Keep that WRC plus. It's 114 in Bowie. Keep that WRC plus, 110, 115 in AAA. Keep showing the power. If the average is still like 220, 230, I'm okay with that. And if the strikeout rate is still hovering around 30%, but everything else is remaining consistent, honestly, I'm okay with that as well. Again, that still leaves him as a pretty good option to be that fourth outfielder at the major league level. And like I said, I really liked. I hadn't looked at his splits all year, so I thought it was really comforting to see that there's virtually no difference in the lefty-righty splits. So like that gives him another advantage there. So yeah, just maintain. I'm not looking for him to take a giant step forward in AAA over the next couple of months or the final month of this year and the start of next year. Just maintain and continue to wow us out there in center field. Hopefully, more people get to watch that now.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not going to turn Fabian into a 270 to 280 hitter. I just don't think that's going to happen. But even if the batting average is around 230 next year, if the power and the walk rate are still there, I'll be encouraged because he does everything else really well in the field. He runs the bases fairly well, even if that's not necessarily reflected in the stolen base total this year. So he's already got a good skill set to build from. And as long as the hit tool doesn't take too much of a dive at AAA and we don't see the power of the walks go down with it, I'm fine with that. And we'll move on now to the next part of this episode, which is the best of the rest. Last week, we brought you our updated top 50 list, basically the mid-season list, although it's really not mid-season. And that includes some players that were part of this year's draft class, as well as some guys that were not ranked on our preseason list that had made big jumps. So if you've not had a chance to listen to that yet, go back and listen to it after this episode, because if you're listening to us talk about this, you're like, well, I've been hearing a lot about Killer Morphe recently, and he's not in the best of the rest. Where is he? Well, he's on the top 50. So you can go check that out there. There's some other guys that fit the bill. And with some fast risers, we had to make a lot of really tough choices, especially towards the bottom of the list. And that's what you're going to see here, as every player that I'm about to mention got at least one vote from one of us to be on the top 50 list. But because our overall top 50 is an aggregate of our individual three lists, sometimes players don't make the overall top 50. In fact, we've had at least one instance where a guy made every single one of our top 50 lists, but didn't make the overall one because he ranked too low on all 50. So something to keep in mind as you listen to this, and it comes up here with the first player I'm about to mention, Silas Ardway, who was 44th on my list, but did not make the overall top 50 because he was left off of Bob and Nick's list. Now, Ardway, since he came into the system in 2022, has been one of those guys that at some point bounces off and on all of our lists. And if you're a patron, you might see the monthly updates. Sometimes he's on there, sometimes he's not. And really what it just comes down to is that he's an excellent defensive catcher who has considerable questions about the bat. And frankly, his performance at Bowie this year has not really settled questions about his ceiling as a hitter, With that said, I like the defense enough that as I was looking at the back part of my list, I thought about his floor versus some higher ceiling guys that were younger, don't have as much of a track record. And I felt like he fit in with some of the graduations and trades from the Orioles system recently. So that's why I had him there. But there's a general tendency for Ordway to come on one of our lists and then come off within a month or two. And that may very well happen with my list. So, Nick, I'll start with you because I think of the three of us, you've probably been the one that has had Ordway on your individual list the most. What were your thoughts about him this time around?
Yeah, he's always been on the back end of my list. I really liked him just because he's the kind of the guy in the system that I typically like fall in love with pretty quickly. No real reason why, but these like defensive minded catchers who like rarely hit. I don't know. I just enjoy them for some reason. But yeah, I just felt like there's another name that we're going to talk about who I considered to put in my top 50. Another catcher who I thought was more athletic, probably a better bat that I wanted to put in my top 50. But when I got to the end of the list there, there's so many pitchers. I mean, we've been on it all year the pitcher. So I just felt like there are a lot of guys with high floors, guys that I dropped considerably that I didn't want to completely drop out of the top 50 that have high floors that I wanted to keep in there. And then there are some up and coming, these younger high ceiling arms that I wanted to put in there as well. So Ordway didn't make my top 50, but yeah, like there's no denying his defensive ability. I think he's one of the couple of catchers in this system who's going to have a very long professional career, major league career TBD, but they're going to, I could see Ordway going from, team to team, at least on minor league deals. Teams are always going to be interested in him for his defensive abilities. I was just hoping to see a little bit more with the bat this year. He's got a WRC plus of 77 in Bowie. I don't need to see much from his bat, but I need a little bit more than that. Like Maverick Hanley showed us more, and he's been showing us more the last couple of years. If Ordway could give you the offensive type of numbers that Maverick Hanley's been putting up over the last year or two, then he probably would have still been in my top 50. But it's been kind of a tough go for him. Still think very highly of him. He's going to have a very long career, but
yeah, he screams backup catcher / depth AAA catcher at some point, like Nick said, for a long time, and bouncing between the majors and the minors. Probably be a guy that gets claimed on waivers about 10 times in his career before it's all said and done. And a guy like him, Maverick Hanley, Blake Hunt, who they got from Michael Baumann, these guys are just going to always be right around 50, 60 on my personal list. And if there's a bunch of trades and there wasn't a draft that infused talent at the same time, or if there's some promotions, then there's a chance he could bounce up into the bottom of my top 50. But at the moment, not the case, but certainly a very solid player to have, and clearly something the Orioles value because they stack their catcher position with these types of guys.
So the next player on our list at number 52 is catcher Ryan Stafford. And this may or may not be the player that Nick was alluding to a minute ago. So I will actually go back to him on this one. Stafford is a new addition to the Orioles system. He was taken in the 5th round of this year's draft out of Cal Poly, and some national outlets, including Fangraphs, have pretty good reports out about Stafford right now, noting his overall athleticism. And if you want to base it on a comparison to some catchers already in the system, there's a lot of unknowns about Stafford right now, but a lot of outlets bring up the athleticism, the fact that he has played some other positions in college, though he's primarily been a catcher, has been noted, and the defensive profile looks pretty good. Obviously, though, this is a player that we don't have a lot of information on right now, so I don't think any of us, knowing that he's not an Ethan Anderson or a Griff O'Farrell, where he's not chosen that part of the draft and has been doing it at Virginia for the last few years, maybe didn't feel like we could put Stafford too high on our list. I had him at 46. Bob also had him on his personal top 50 at number 50, taking the final spot. So he makes 2 out of 3 lists, but not enough to make the overall top 50. Nick, I'll start back with you on this. I get the sense, if I'm correct, that you were considering Stafford for the top 50. Why was that? And then what made you decide to lead him off?
Yeah, it was Stafford. I was trying to find the image real quick. I forgot the name of the guy too. Poor planning here. He's like a student manager from like Arizona or Arizona State or something. And at draft time, he was pumping out all like these, player data cards for the college guys that were really awesome. And I think Stafford's was it popped. So I wish I could go back and find it real quick and rattle off some of his college numbers, but they were fantastic. I know Baseball in America was pretty high on Stafford, at least one individual over at Peter Flaherty, who does a great job covering college baseball for Baseball in America. He was super high on Stafford, I think this time last year. I just think he was the more athletic, offensive-minded catcher. And so I wanted to put him in the back end of my top 50. But again, I left him off because what I said earlier about the pitchers. But he debuted this week in Delmarva. Delmarva added what? Miguel Rodriguez, Ryan Stafford, Ethan Anderson, and Colin Tufts. Like they added like 4 or 5 catchers. But Ryan Stafford played a game in right field, 2 games at catcher, and even a game at second base last week. So I thought that was really interesting. It's like, yeah, they drafted a lot of catchers in this year's draft, but this year's class, Ethan Anderson, Ryan Stafford included, these were more athletic catchers who play multiple positions, which I think was an interesting shift instead of bringing in the defensive-minded guys like the Connor Pavalonis and the Silas Ardoes. You bring in more Ryan Stafford types who they provide a bit more athleticism. You've got the good group of defenders in the system already who can help bring the pitchers along. But now you bring guys who maybe they stick behind the plate, maybe they don't. But you've got Adley, you've got Basayo. And so now you bring these other guys like Stafford, who if they can provide enough offensively, they're capable of moving around the field and not just first base where the bat is going to have to really take off. And they're going to have to develop this extreme power, which none of these guys have. But they can play second, they can play corner outfield spot, and potentially still be an asset for you. So I thought that was an interesting shift this year in the draft philosophy with these catchers. And Stafford, I think, is the top guy there. So I think he's going to be a fun guy to watch down in Delmarva next year.
Yeah, echo everything Nick said. And the reason he makes my list, again, right around 50, similar to Silas Ardoin, is I just think there's a little bit more upside with the bat with him. Like Nick was talking about those cards, he had some notable numbers there. And yeah, I like the upside play. So he barely made it onto the list.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
I won't let my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis symptoms define me.
Emerge as you. In 2 clinical studies, Tremfya guselkumab, taken by injection, provided 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks in 7 out of 10 adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. In a study, nearly 7 out of 10 patients with 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks were still clearer at 5 years. At 1 year and thereafter, patients and healthcare providers knew that Tremfya was being used. This may have increased results. Results may vary.
Serious allergic reactions may occur. Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms of infection, including fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Tell your doctor if you had a vaccine or plan to.
Emerge as you. Learn more about Tremfya, including important safety information at tremfya.com or call 1-877-578-3527. See our ad in Food & Wine magazine. For patients prescribed Tremfya, cost support may be available.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I'll group the next 2 players together because I think the conversation about them is probably pretty similar, and that's number 53, Ellis Cuevas, and then number 54, Edwin Amparo. Both of those players recently were promoted from the FCL to Delmarva after pretty good runs there. And while it would be tempting to look at them as being very similar types of players, both are young international signees who have yet to play a full year of pro ball. They're a little bit different profiles. I had a chance to see both of them for the first time in person over the weekend when Delmarva took on Carolina. And Cuevas what stands out about him is that he can fly. He runs the bases really well. He covers ground in the outfield. We expect that he's going to get some reps in center field next year at Delmarva. For now, you got to see, we'll see how the hit tool plays out, but the offense down in the FCL was pretty good this year. 270 average to go with an 810 OPS in 56 games. That allowed him to come on Nick's and my list. He ranked 48 on both of our lists, but he missed Bob's list. Bob, however, had Amparo on his list at number 45. And Amparo, one of the things that he does really well is he's got a great eye at the plate. 39 walks to 37 strikeouts this year in the FCL. That allowed him to have a 400 on base percentage. And that followed a season in which he walked 21 times and struck out only 18, again at the FCL, while posting a 384 on base percentage. So Amparo, who was only 19 years old, repeated the FCL this year, took a good step forward at the plate, and is still a patient hitter. Cuevas, meanwhile, was one of the breakouts in the FCL this year at 19 years old, and seems to be getting a little bit of notice nationally. So both of these guys are interesting prospects, but they both fall short of our top 50s. And I know for myself, it speaks to the difficulty of trying to grade a lot of younger players in the Orioles system that have not played a full year of pro ball yet, that have some similar profiles, are all international signees, still teenagers, where there's clear advantages there, but we just still don't have a lot of information to go on. So looking at these two guys, what stands out to both of you? I'll start with Bob on this.
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I think I just have Amparo ahead of Cuevas. Cuevas is close to my top 50 as well. Amparo signed for a bigger bonus. I know he was a part of our list earlier when he was closer to his signing day because of the amount of money he received, and then he kind of had a bad year, which knocked him off. But he really bounced back nicely this year in the complex, and then snuck into low A ball and has performed pretty well there. He's batting 276 with the 710 OPS and already 6 steals down there. He's got a little bit of pop, more of doubles pop at this point, 9 doubles, 10 if you include Delmarva, 4 home runs in the complex. Can play up the middle. I know Cuevas can play up the middle in the outfield as well, but I don't know. I like them both. They both walk a decent amount, especially Amparo, and don't strike out much, especially Cuevas. He only struck out 12.8% of the time in the FCL this season. I like them both a lot. I just lean Amparo up the middle, just a little more, the money. The money. That means they thought highly of him when they signed him. So I think maybe a higher ceiling, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I go back a couple of years ago when I first started doing this, almost 10 years ago, excuse me. I think someone told me, like, with the international guys, just rank them by the money. This was a national writer too. So I like Cuevas a lot. I wrote about Cuevas in my quick FCL wrap-up piece a few weeks ago over on Substack. A few guys in that write-up, Cartayas finding early success on the mound, and Delmarva. Basically, read our stuff so you're ahead of the curve. Nice little plug there. Ellis Cuevas, though, after I published that article, someone closely connected to the development down in Florida reached out about Cuevas, and just to highlight the fact that the organization really likes him in center field. And I just think that some of the comments that I got from this source, they didn't have to reach out about this player if it was just some random guy that the org wasn't very fond of. But I just think based on who reached out and what they had to say, it perked my ears up a little bit. And so I am intrigued by Cuevas. But as I wrote in that Substack piece, is that I am going to be scarred by Rolfie Cruz, because he put up fantastic FCL numbers and even got some shout outs, some love from Baseball America, who acknowledging the fact that he was an older guy in the FCL. The data, a lot of people were believing that it was showing some promise. But I watched one game of Rolfie Cruz and Delmarva and was like, I don't know. I watched the second game of Rolfie Cruz and Delmarva and said, this guy is nobody. And I think he went back to the FCL and then got cut this year. So I got to see it. I'm glad Zach saw him. So I didn't watch any Delmarva this past week, to be honest. All the new guys joined Delmarva, and here I am. Busy schedule, did not get to watch yet. But I'm excited to watch. Sounds like from Zach's notes there that Cuevas at least looks like he belongs. And that's all I'm worried about right now, is that it looks like he belongs up there. And the game isn't too fast for him. I think there's real potential that he's next year's Aaron Estrada type guy. Just you look, the walk rate was about the same this year in the FCL as it was in the DSL, but the strikeout rate dropped from like 19% down to 12, 13%. He was a 123 WRC plus guy. He had 6 home runs. He stole 33 bases. I'm super intrigued by Ellis Cuevas and excited to see what he can do, because apparently the organization really does like him as a center fielder, and it could be seeing him a lot in there next year when he's, I'm sure, back in Delmarva to begin the year.
Move on now to the next player who fell just short of our top 50, and that is outfielder Jake Cunningham. Cunningham is on our preseason top 50 and had lingered on most of the monthly updates, but drops off of this one as Nick and I had him off of our list while Bob had him at 47th. And the issue for Cunningham this year has just been injuries and inconsistency. He missed some time because of IL stints with Delmarva, and his overall batting line this season still is not great. If you do want to look at a silver lining, however, he has been really good in the month of August, and the Orioles apparently saw enough from him that they made the decision to promote him from Delmarva to Aberdeen last week. And he had been on a hot streak at Delmarva before the promotion, and he rode that into his first week with the Ironbirds, performing very well in their series against Greenville last week. Now, as I said, the overall numbers still aren't great. He's hitting .227 this year with a .650 OPS in 77 games. But Brad Seelick last year after the draft called him to Tool, said, we knew that he was going to be raw coming out of UNC Charlotte, having an injury stint in his final year there. But the numbers this year have been a little underwhelming, I think, to say the least. Where do you think the real Jake Cunningham is? Is it the player who has really come on of late? Now that he's healthy, he's showing a little bit of power and speed? Or is it the guy with a really, really questionable hit tool who is still raw at this point?
I think it's both. Since July 28th, he's got a 168 WRC plus, 383 batting average, 925 OPS. So that's a couple more weeks than this really hot stretch in Aberdeen to start off his high A career. I think the fresh start must have helped his mentality a little bit. Getting off to such a slow start, a really big hole to try to dig yourself out of, and playing much better of late, and still his overall numbers just looked really bad. It's like I said, it's just got to help the mindset to be able to start back at zero and go from there. So I'm just happy that he's off to a good start and hopefully just can stay healthy, continue to make adjustments. He's hitting the ball now. The hit tool doesn't seem to be the problem. Now it's like, where's the power? Which obviously small sample sizes, but we know he's got it. If he can put it all together, might be a little bit more of a project, might take a few extra years than we're used to with these polished hitters that come out of the college game for the Orioles. But maybe he's the next Reed Trimble, where we're like, I don't know, Jake Cunningham, what's going on? Oh my God, he's in AAA and he's hit 30 home runs. I don't know, but I still like him. But do it for longer, and maybe you'll creep back up the list.
Yeah, it was just such a disappointing season, because he started off last year. First home run was opposite field shot. He's robbing home runs. Like, it was like, okay, we Brad Sidick was right. This guy is exciting to watch. And then he just did nothing. Even with the injury, still it was kind of rough. But like you mentioned, he has, since he's been promoted, 5 games, 529 average, 2 walks, 6 stolen bases in 5 games. All 9 hits were singles, so there is that. But still, like Bob said, it's a fresh start. Considering he hit 208 with a 640 something OPS in low A, like, I'll take it. I don't know. Maybe he just really hated Salisbury. I don't know. I've been there once. I drove in right to the game that my one Delmarva game went to and left right after because it was a 4-hour drive. Maybe he just hated the town. I don't know. Maybe it's boring and it sucked the fun out of him and he didn't want to play baseball there. And he loves Aberdeen for some reason. I don't know. But it's good to see he's hitting the ball and it looks like he's having some fun out there, which we'll see. Like, to answer the question, I'm still skeptical. It's only been a week, and like I said, they're all singles, but it's at least something, considering he really wasn't showing us anything for the first 90% of the season. I'm glad he's showing us a little bit of life here at the end.
I have a lot to say about Salisbury, Maryland, but people don't listen to this show for 2080 scouting reports on the breweries within the state of Maryland, so we'll save that for another time. I'll go now to Eudes Mordon, who was also recently promoted from Delmarva to Aberdeen. Mordon, a 20-year-old catcher, showed a lot of power, belting 13 home runs with the Shorebirds while posting a WRC plus of 112. He did only hit 220, but he had a 12.6% walk rate to go to 26.7% strikeout rate. Now, aside from his age and questions about the hit tool, one thing that does pop up about Mordon are concerns about the defense. He did rank 48th on Bob's list, but fell short of Nick and Mai's list. I did consider Mordon for a back-end spot, somewhere in like the 47 to 50 range. He was just short for me. I do love the power. That's what one thing I will say is that the power is for real. For a young hitter, he does walk a lot, but I think the two things that stick out to me as question marks are, is the hit tool going to develop, and is he going to have to move out from behind the plate eventually? So I feel like we're probably not that far apart on the way we see Mordon, but Bob, you had him on your list, so what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I just like that he's a young catcher in this system that has, developed catchers pretty well, I'd say. And I think he's got a good bat. Yeah, maybe he'll have to move off and be more of a first base DH type at some point, but I kind of have faith that he'll at least be able to be a part-time catcher, backup catcher type of guy. I just like the hit tool is questionable. The strikeout rate is a little high, but I just trust the organization to get the most out of him, and the power. So if he can at least be serviceable behind the plate, that's an offensive-minded backup catcher, or at least a guy that you can trade down the line. I just like the profile a little bit different than a lot of the other catchers in the system, and he's young, so there's still plenty of upside there. Only 20 years old, just turned 20 a couple months ago.
Yeah. I like Mordon. I didn't consider him for my top 50, but I'm still a fan. 112 WRC plus as a 19, 20-year-old catcher in low A is pretty impressive. I don't think they don't promote these guys just to promote them, like to make room for the draft picks. Like if they aren't good players, they're just going to bench them or cut them. So I think Jake Cunningham, Mordon, Thomas Sosa, like all these guys that got promoted from Delmarva to Aberdeen, they got promoted for a reason because the organization believes in them, at least right now. And so Mordon is a guy who I've always had questions about. Like, if he does move over to first base, is he going to hit enough? Is he going to have enough power? I don't know. But I do agree it is a much different profile. He's kind of a unique backstop in this system. I think the power could be pretty impressive as he gets older and develops and gets bigger and stronger. I think he could be easily top 20 home runs a year when he's in the minor leagues. We'll see what happens as he gets a little bit older, see what the conditioning looks like as he gets older as well, and where he ends up defensively. But for right now, I'll take a catcher with a 112 WRC plus at any level.
We'll wrap up now as the final two players on this list. Both are right-handed pitchers, but they are very much in different places in their careers, and that is Peter Van Loon and Esteban Mejia. I'll start with Van Loon, who's probably a familiar name to our listeners because he has been in the system for a few years now. 16th round pick out of Cal Irvine by the Orioles in 2021. He really struggled last year at Bowie and then opened this year on the IL. Since he got back on the mound, though, he has been nothing short of impressive and has basically overcome his struggles at AA. After posting a home run to fly ball rate of 17.9% with the Bay Sox last year, he has actually not given up a home run with Bowie all year. Meanwhile, the strikeout rate is among the best of his career, really not walking a lot of batters. And granted, 27 innings pitched is still a small sample size, but he has looked really good. The secondaries, good command of those, maybe about 92, 93 with the fastball in most starts, but the pitch has pretty good movement. Meanwhile, Mejia is a 17-year-old signed by the Orioles out of the Dominican Republic who is making his professional debut this year. Really good numbers in the DSL so far, 44 strikeouts over 27 and 2/3 innings pitched while walking 15 batters. he has gotten a little bit of attention nationally, which is worth noting as well. Nick had both of these pitchers on his list. He had Van Loon 49th, Mejia 50th. I know that both of them were in consideration for my list, and they fell just short. I can't speak for Bob, though, so we'll go to his thoughts in a minute. But, Nick, starting with you, Van Loon is kind of a familiar name at this point. We know his strengths and weaknesses, and his strengths have certainly been on full display over the last couple of months. Mejia, meanwhile, is a newcomer to the system, showing a lot of promise. So what can you tell us about these two guys?
With Mejia, it was just the upside. 17 years old, part of the 2024 class. He's 6'3" and touches 100 miles per hour. So reportedly, so that's something we don't often see with these fireballers of his age at this level, was the control as well. He's got 44 strikeouts to just 15 walks in 27 innings this season in the DSL. Even Keeler Morphe, who is skyrocketing up list right now, walked an absurd number of guys last year. But Mejia is tall, and he's got this power arm already showcasing good control. I am very intrigued. Haven't seen a pitch, haven't pulled up a broadcast yet to see more about him, but it's just the control and the age and the velo. Right now, it's got me excited. Peter Van Loon, I think, is a little bit more interesting. I did have him 49 on my list. Like you said, he missed most of the year with an injury. Don't know exactly what it was. I don't know if you guys know, but he didn't start his season until June 4th when he rehabbed in the FCL. Since he's been back to AA, 27 innings, 40 strikeouts, 11 walks. Like Zach mentioned, no home runs allowed. I don't know. Like, I put him up there because like what made him interesting when he was in the Arizona Fall League, is that last year or even 2 years ago? I think it was last year. He was reportedly hitting like 98 in the Arizona Fall League. I don't think he's been near that this year, but maybe he gets back into the 96 plus range as a reliever at some point. Clearly, the organization wants to keep working him as a starter. I kind of briefly touched on this last week that I feel like Peter Van Loon is on the Justin Armbruster track right now. I feel like they're very similar. Like they've made great strides in their stuff. And now Van Loon has reached this point where he's starting to really dominate AA at a consistent level. Let's see how the stuff plays in AAA. Can he get to AAA and find success while being able to command the strike zone? Because I don't want to discredit Van Loon and his abilities and what he's doing, but I feel like with Van Loon, his size and his stuff, he can still fairly easily, quote unquote, put guys away in AA. He can get guys to chase down there, but those AAA hitters aren't going to chase. And I feel like that's kind of an issue we've seen with Armbruster this year. I know Bob's pointed this out a lot in like dailies and stuff. You know, Armbruster struggles to find the strike zone, and then when he does force himself into the zone, hitters just feast on his stuff all night long. Is that what we see with Van Loon, or is Van Loon's stuff, does that play up better in the zone when he gets to AAA? I don't know. We got to wait and see. I don't think he's going to get to AAA this year, but it will be interesting to see which trajectory his career takes. He is Rule 5 eligible. I will say that. There's some kinks here. He's Rule 5 eligible, so I think that puts him into a unique situation. Do you believe in his stuff enough and want to protect him this offseason? Or do you think the risk is low enough to where you can leave him unprotected and don't worry about losing him? He may not reach AAA this year. He doesn't have an elite tool that really stands out. So I think there'd be 5% chance he gets selected in the Rule 5 draft, if that. The only thing that gives me a bit of concern, and maybe goes from 5% chance to a 7% chance, is that he seemingly was really good in the Arizona Fall League. And so if there was a scout out there who, you get more data, you get more intimate looks at a guy. If there's a scout who really liked what they, fell in love with Van Loon out there in the Arizona Fall League, and he pounds the table hard enough for Van Loon in the Rule 5 draft time at his organization, potentially, he could be an option for that team. But I don't know. I'm interested to see what next year brings for Van Loon if he's still in the organization. Is it the Armbruster path, or does he take a step forward? And now we're talking about a major league option next year.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I know we were big fans of Peter Van Loon when he was first entering the system. He's had some ups and downs, whether it's injuries or just poor performance. Like Nick noted, he was one of the biggest velocity increases in minor league baseball, I want to say, him and Garrett Stallings last year. were the ones from the Orioles that showed up on lists like that and performed well in the Arizona Fall League. And it's strange that he pitched 3 games in high A to a 6.30 ERA, only struck out 26.5% of batters. But now he's been back in Double A, and 37.4% he struck out like an elite level. So maybe it's just he's finally learning the pitch mix that they've been working with, and it's all clicking at the right time. 25 years old, it's kind of now or never for him. So, yeah, I would be curious to see if he survives the Rule 5 draft and see what the Orioles can do with him next year. Esteban Mejia, I love all these international arms with great stuff and plenty of time and upside on their hands for the organization. And there's another Esteban, Luna, who performed really well in the DSL as well at 17 years old. So year of the pitcher, the more arms, the better. Let's get him into this pitching development system that we have in place.
And since we just gave you a rundown of the guys who narrowly missed our top 50, we basically counted that as our typical final segment where we shout out players who are outside of our top 50, or at least outside the top 30 portion of the top 50. But that segment will be back next week. In the meantime, though, you can look forward to more content from us later this week as we bring you a Major League Mailbag episode. I'm also going to have write-ups of some of the players who stood out to me during my visit to Delmarva this past weekend, including Keeler Morphe, as well as Austin O'Verne, Brylan Tavera, and Juan Rojas. So you can check that out later on this week. In the meantime, you can find us on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, X, and YouTube. I just mentioned our Substack. You can find us there at oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community. You can join as a paying member for as little as $3 a month. And at the $5 and $10 levels, get bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. I know we haven't had as much of that lately, but rest assured that is coming back up here in the next few weeks. And another perk of being a patron, you get monthly top 50 updates. So if one of the guys who we highlighted tonight is falling just short of our top 50, makes a list next month, you're going to be one of the only people who knows that. So a good incentive to sign up for our Patreon community. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
I won't let my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis symptoms define me.
Emerge as you. In 2 clinical studies, Tremfya guselkumab, taken by injection, provided 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks in 7 out of 10 adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. In a study, nearly 7 out of 10 patients with 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks were still clearer at 5 years. At 1 year and thereafter, patients and healthcare providers knew that Tremfya was being used. This may have increased results. Results may vary.
Serious allergic reactions may occur. Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms of infection, including fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Tell your doctor if you had a vaccine or plan to.
Emerge as you. Learn more about Tremfya, including important safety information at tremfya.com or call 1-877-578-3527. See our ad in Food and Wine magazine. For patients prescribed Tremfya, cost support may be available.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
At Ashley, you'll find colorful furniture that brings your home to life. Ashley makes it easier than ever to express your personal style with an array of looks in fun trending hues to choose from earth tones to vibrant colors to calming blues and greens. Ashley has pieces for every room in the house in the season's most sought-after shades. A more colorful life starts at Ashley. Shop in store or online today. Ashley, for the love of home.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRANGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You know when you're listening to a true crime story that has an unbelievable plot twist that makes you stop in your tracks? That's what our podcast, People Are the Worst, brings you with each episode. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Rebecca. We're identical twins who love true crime cases that make you say, didn't see that coming, and we hate the people responsible for them. Listen to People Are the Worst now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.